what's up?
Hey folks, Jerry here. Welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast, a show that explores the wipeouts, crackups, and recoveries of inspiring and influential people. Here you'll get the stories of the quest to find success beyond the struggle and the great leaps of innovation that take us there. People that sound like this.
JLD.
What's up,
Jerry,
What's up, man?
What's up, brother?
Thank you so much,
Well, I'm
Jerry. This has
excited to
been
hear, Jerry.
fantastic.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you so much for having me.
Fun today.
Keep telling your story as well.
Yeah, man. Hello, John.
Hey, can you hear me okay? Yeah, so I don't have a good mic, but taking your advice, I found the quietest place to be in my truck parked somewhere.
Today we deep dive the life story of John Allen, a world's top-ranked gamer who became a Navy SEAL, and then after retirement, defied convention by challenging the unwritten rules of the Warrior Code. All right, strap in, folks, as we head into a story about self-sacrifice and change and the challenges of confronting the past to build a promising future.
I'm stoked to have you on.
Yeah.
Sound like you got a wild story.
I do have that. I am confident in the wildness of my story.
I bet.
Heads up, folks, doing things a bit differently on this episode. John and I had a nice pre-interview chat, so I'm going to give you access to that. All you got to do is keep going forward. You'll run straight into it. If you don't want to listen to that, just press chapter 1, which is the show, and it'll skip you ahead. I kept it in there because John and I had an opportunity to talk about the hero's journey from two sides of the Navy SEALs training story. I dropped, he went on. And he also tells a pretty damn funny story about getting blown up with CS tear gas in third phase of training. So you might want to check that out. All right, folks, hope you enjoy.
Iteration and figuring out the core of your own story, which helps
Yeah.
a little bit. And part of the benefit of doing what I do now is I get to reach out to people that intrigue me, and I get to be a little selfish too. And Navy SEALs was part of my story. It's kind of what fucked me up from the beginning, like recovering from the whole buds thing, and then ending up as a therapist. That was a big part of my journey, is like figuring it out.
I'll say this without really knowing much more about you, except for what you told me. It's honestly pretty cool that you're just like forthright about, I dropped from buds, because that's an experience that I don't think people realize is probably really traumatic. I'm not just pandering here at all.
No, it was because, like, as you know, you don't create room in your brain for that.
I know.
I'd constructed some image in my head of what I was going to be, and then it didn't end up happening, and I fell apart in a lot of ways.
I to be honest, I'm surprised that that's not a more known thing, because it's
right.
just I don't know. I mean, it seems like when guys drop, which it's like anyone who goes to buds, it's not a shocker. I mean, you know what buds is, and frankly, I would say that, dude, I was a fucking horrible bud student. I was just lucky. Seriously, I was literally terrible. I sucked at pool comp. I sucked at everything. I just was lucky enough to not get hurt. I was lucky enough to kind of just make it here and there. It's like anyone that says that buds is there are people that make it and those that don't, that's not true. There's such a huge element of just having good stretches of days, getting lucky with injury.
I think you can gain humility in two ways through that experience. One is having your image shattered early on, oh shit, I didn't make it. And that's you have to deconstruct this image that you create around yourself. I'm going to be the fucking hero. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to survive it, because you burn away the ego and you actually see how these other elements that you're talking about, it's not just power. There's all these other things that come into play, lack of injury, there's the help of your teammates and perseverance. And, there's a lot more going on that people really understand about the people that make it to that level.
I always thought that, while I was in training, because I definitely definitively had moments where, I'm not even saying in the moments when I was should I quit or not or anything like that. I mean, I literally had do or die. If you don't pass this, it is definitive that you will not be in training anymore. So I definitely had moments where I knew that it was like, okay, well, if I don't pass pool comp on my 7th fucking try because I suck at pool comp, then I'm going to be done. And it was like not a question mark. I'd go to a board, and I'm air quoting, but I definitely was going to be out. And I remember feeling so thankful and lucky because believe me, it was like just one of those things where, you know, I really feel like I've always been a person that finds a way to be lucky. I've really always felt that way. And it did. By the end of SEAL training, I'm like looking around and I'm like, dude, this is legitimately ridiculous that I'm here because it didn't. I was like literally. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, people liked me. I cared. I tried, but like by fucking no means am I like this strapping jock that like showed up ready to be a SEAL. It was like, I'm here, guys. Hopefully, I keep up with you.
One of the reasons that I'm reaching out to the people that I have that are on the SEAL side is because everybody I've reached out to, Brent, Mark, you, are people that have humility, because part of it is just taking the veil off of this shit.
Yeah.
You know, culture has kind of developed this image and pumped it out there around what people are that make it to these elite levels and do what they do. No, they're just people, you know, and I think that's it helps deepen the connection to people that are taking the risks to keep our lives, you know, safe and to do the things that we do, but it also kind of deepens connection.
Are we recording now? Is this part of the show?
No, I'll probably use some of it if you don't mind. You know?
Okay. No. I was gonna say use whatever you want. I'm whatever, however you want to do it. But there was I did a post this morning about when I ran during the CS gas portion of third phase. So like you get the third phase of buds, and you know, by and large, you're totally, you know, you're basically a team guy. You know that whole
yeah.
shtick.
Once you're on the island, you're there.
Yeah, you're kind of just like paying your dues at that point, and the island is like, I mean, it's pretty much like first phase all over again in that it's very like physically demanding and it's a lot of crappy things. But early on, you basically like huddle up in a group and they just light off a bunch of CS grenades, like military grade strength tear gas. It completely encapsulated us. Totally like the fight or flight instinct kicked in, and I am pure flight. Like, dude, I bolted before I thought. Like, fell face first into a fucking cactus. The instructor's like looking at me like, holy shit, what's wrong with you? Get the fuck back in the group. And I didn't. And I remember like, so after it like settles and the gas settles, I was like, holy shit, that's so bad that I just did that. And like the class knew it. And the way it works on the island is when
yeah, I'm interested to hear this dynamic.
Oh my dude. Oh, they have recourse for it. This is totally a thing. So there's a couple things that if you do while on the island, there are these like hidden like punishments.
Is this like kangaroo court or I did the wheel of misfortune a couple times.
Yeah. So this was if you run during the CS gas, which it happens enough. Although frankly at the time I was like very devastated and I felt very embarrassed. Still it's embarrassing. Yeah. It's funny, but it's embarrassing. You know, they make you wear the instructors make you wear, you know, those like stupid UDT shorts that we had to wear in training.
Yeah, right. Nobody wanted to wear them.
You have to wear them over your uniform.
Oh, great.
So like you look like you have underwear on, like over everything else. And so it's like we come back from the gas and like everyone is miserable except they had endured the full 2 minutes. I was like on the outskirts and you're more or less okay because I had bolted and they hadn't. Like my class was like devastated from inhaling like the worst toxic fume you can take.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
And we're sitting in the classroom, like, and it was like very clear. Everyone, the instructors and everybody knew what had happened. This was not like John secretly ran away.
Yeah, the spotlight's on you right now. Yeah.
Completely. And this is like day 2. And it's a new instructor staff. It's like the worst case scenario. And, you know, we get in the classroom and right away, it's like the first thing the instructors do is like, Alan, stand up.
Oh, fuck.
And my class is like still like reeling from the effects of the CS gas. They're looking at me and I'm like, fine. And he's like, Alan, you will never be a good fucking Navy SEAL. Sit the fuck down, you pussy.
Oh man.
And I remember and then they were like, yeah, and put these on. You're not gonna take these off the rest of the time you're on the island. And I had these UDT shorts. But the thing about it was like it was like obviously I'm like devastated. And it was like, who to blame? No one but me.
Right. There's no way. But those are the kind of confrontations that I think people can really learn from. Meaning in life, we're faced with the same shit, like where you're trying to gain sole responsibility for, your engagement with others, for your success and your happiness. SEALs, I mean, training forces you to confront that part of yourself that you might not be comfortable with. The parts of you that run, the parts of you that like looks for an easy way, you know, like you're at every stage of the way, you're confronted with that. And there's value to it, no matter how you respond or how you react. It's just owning it.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that's the value of what warriors go through in that process is they have no illusions about who they are and what others are, right?
No,
like,
no, you know everybody's business, you know who's good at what.
Totally.
And if you don't own something fucked up that you did, it will haunt you forever. But if you own it, it almost becomes
you're okay.
It's almost like a mark of, okay, that's this guy gets it. You know, but like heaven forbid you don't take full responsibility for something, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how bad it makes you look, that is yours to own, that is your burden to bear. And in my post, I basically say that like this moment where I'm standing up in the classroom and this instructor, like it was worse than normal. A lot of times if you fail a run, as you know,
I can imagine they made an example out of that. Having been there, oh my God.
This guy, this could be a problem down the road. So everyone take note. and so I remember thinking like, wow, this will be the moment that I'll look back on, that this either destroyed my reputation for good and ended my career effectively, or this is the moment where I figure out who I really am. Because like, unlike physical pain, which you just need to suffer through, this was like my own friends weren't even bringing it up to me. Like this wasn't a jokey thing. Oh, no big deal, John. This was, no one talks about it because this actually might be a big deal. And so I just kind of made a point from that point on that I was like, you know what, all I can do is just keep showing up.
Dude, that's such a powerful story.
Yeah.
I'm going to use this. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think it illustrates something else too, right? Like the whole what's in my control, what's outside of my control. When you face shame, it's really all it is a fucking story.
Yeah.
And somebody's got a perception of you based upon a behavior. But if you choose to own it and make it yours, you can let it go eventually, right? Because nobody's interested in you. Nobody fucking cares about what you're dealing with, and they get over it after a while.
Oh, yeah.
So as long as you can get over it, right, and confront that part of yourself with, it ends up usually being, let me give myself a new story about me, you know, based upon what you're able to do each and every day. You get over it too.
Yeah.
Right? It's just the ego. Shame is just about the ego.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a powerful thing.
That story, the John Allen CS gas story, which is definitely a known thing to my friends. It's really like now it's become, because I owned it, and because, I mean, it's also been years since this happened, but now it's definitely like an endearing anecdote about about a guy that people want to work with. That's why it's funny. That's why it's a funny anecdote, because when people think of me, this story is counter to what they know of me. And that's why it's funny. And so, but that only happened because I made it that way. I demonstrated
it made you
day in, day out. Like, I'm not that guy. This was one thing. And guess what? I'm owning it. And I'm going to learn from it and get better.
John Allen, welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast. Happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on this one. This is a unique podcast in a sea of very similar podcasts.
Well, I always know there's something unique about the people that sign up for it, who are willing to go through this. Like, wait a minute, I'm going to be sitting down with a therapist for an hour-long interview. He's going to talk about my low point. All right, that sounds like a good idea.
Well, I just figured you'd be able to carry the interview if it got really bad.
Well, we'll see what happens, John. Well, let me catch a listener up real quick. If we happen to have a few things in common, you're on the other side of something that I set out to achieve. And one of the things that I thought was interesting in your response was that it's important to hear both sides of the story.
You know, obviously you were in SEAL training and ultimately didn't become a SEAL. And I was in SEAL training and did become a SEAL. And really and it's not just to be like, you know, oh, I'm such a humble guy. But truthfully, by the end of SEAL training, if you survive it, you look around and it's just kind of mind blowing, the people that are left, not because they're not competent or amazing people. It's that it's just such a random group of people that just doesn't fit the archetype of what you thought a Navy SEAL was going to be. Specifically, it's so much of it is luck. I mean, geez, if you break your leg mid-training, well, guess what? That's a big setback. You'll be lucky if you even get back into training. And so it's
even the emotional challenge around that, right? Having to confront the idea of doing Hell Week again or something like that,
or just losing your class, right? So you're in a class, you get hurt, you're churning along, but you get hurt. All those people that you've been struggling with and building a rapport with, you're gone. You're getting rolled to the next class, and then you're showing up to the next class. They don't know you, and you have to prove yourself to them. And oh my God, it's horrible.
That's another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I'm looking forward to kind of, hearing your side of the story, which is the emotional journey of that process. A lot of people on the outside, they put like people like Navy SEALs or Delta Force or all these other things, they put people on a pedestal and they divorce themselves from the reality of the real human journey that goes on while it's happening. I mean, you're willing to talk to that. And so was Brent. I had Brent on last time. And, he talked about some of the codes around the warrior's way when you're in training. The reality is a lot of that stuff does get stuffed while you're in it. But nonetheless, you're experiencing the emotional highs and lows, and you're starting to talk about the dynamics. There's real connections. There's real relationships. You're breaking your own expectations about who's going to make it and who's not. And I can totally relate to that, So let's start to dig into John just a little bit. You are the guy that was standing when the final bell rang in training. So you're a co-founder of Elite Meat. You're a former Navy SEAL. You're a family man. I read some of the articles that were written by your mother, which were really powerful, by the way. So how do you see yourself showing up every day?
Yeah, having even prepped for this question, it's one that I've really not been asked before, and certainly not over the past couple of years, as my life has really taken a turn from something very defined, which was not that I just was a Navy SEAL, that my job was a Navy SEAL, but that like I embodied being a Navy SEAL, that was who I was. And so I guess the person I am now, because I left the SEAL team, it's defined, frankly, by a series of kind of unfortunate events that I was able to, turn into something positive. The short version is, I got to a SEAL team. Obviously, you and I both know there's quite a bit that goes into earning your trident and making it to a team. Once I got there, pretty confident that I would do a full career. And I went on a deployment, my first deployment, which was to Afghanistan. And, by all accounts, that's kind of like hitting the lottery. I mean, especially when I got to a team, it was 2012. And while certainly there were deployments going to the Middle East, they were fewer and farther between. And so first deployment, getting to go to Afghanistan, it's like big deal, opportunity to kind of cut your teeth a little bit as a junior SEAL, kind of, earn your stripes, so to speak. And by all accounts, the deployment that we went on was kind of what I expected it to be. It was kinetic, we were doing things that people would say that's what a Navy SEAL does. And it really was just kind of somewhat profound experience to be existing on the front lines of war. And at the end of the deployment, I was, not me, our whole team was involved in a kind of epic firefight / ambush. That resulted in a grenade, actually a couple grenades, landing next to me and next to my 5 other teammates that were right next to me. Detonated, and the good news is all of the good guys lived, but it was a very close call for me, certainly, and for my teammates as well.
Enemy down.
And it prompted a discussion when I came home from that deployment, because I actually was, flown out through the medevac procedure. I was flown home, and being around my wife for the first time after getting back after this deployment, and her packing this wound that's like in my hip, and it's like totally obscene. it opened this discussion between us where, what might have been a done deal, i.e. John will do a career, John will stay in for a career. It was not that anymore. Any of the sexiness associated with the job was totally gone. So with a 4-year runway, I start prepping for my big exit from the military. I already had a degree from UMass. I studied philosophy, one of our commonalities. And so with a degree, I figured, I'll just go to business school when I get out again in 4 years. And then I'll hopefully go on to one of the top consulting firms and live happily ever after. As it happens, most fields really that I had been speaking to that got out short of 20 years, that ended up being a very common path. And so I'm organizing my life towards getting out, going to business school. And then in 2017, which at the time of this thing I'm about to tell you, it was about maybe a year and a half, a year and 3/4 when my contract was supposed to end. I found out that there had been a mistake made on my contract, basically prematurely ending my contract. And there was no way I could really see it. It was just an unfortunate thing where I went from having about almost 2 years of runway to, in 8 weeks, if you don't re-enlist basically right now, you're going to be out of the military. And so obviously this was abrupt, and my plans for business school that I've been working on for years are out the window because now I need a job now. My wife's pregnant with our second kid. It's like really unfortunate, and even worse was my friends and peers that were in the Navy. What do you think their advice was?
Well, you got to stay in. You got 8 weeks. You don't get a job. You got to look after your wife, right? You got to look after your family.
But at home, my wife's like, well, you better find a job because we committed to getting out 3 years ago. So tough situation. So I said, okay, I'm going to get a job. And I connected with this guy named Jordan Selleck, who is my co-founder at Elite Meat, who's a former investment banker turned entrepreneur. And what followed initially was he wanted to help me with my job search, which was a complete mess. But he quickly identified in me specifically that he's like, it seems like you would get a lot of benefit out of just meeting some people that are doing the jobs that you claim you want to do. Because really, I only knew jobs in theory. Because I was thinking about business school. I was talking to people that were training for these jobs. I wasn't talking to people doing them. And so I said, that's a great idea. So what should have been this kind of John goes to New York to meet Jordan's network, I wanted to make it more impactful. So I said, hey, I'll bring some people that I know that are getting out of the teams and out of these special units. They're going to come with me because they're getting out of the military soon. And so they can use this type of exposure. We actually raised about $50,000 to cover everybody's flight. We go to New York and we have this networking event. And very selfishly, I hoped I was going to get a job or meet someone that could help me get a job out of this event. But kind of ironically, I found out later that the event was run so well and the attendees were so strong, and the fact that I and Jordan were really emceeing the whole thing, people just assumed that this was my full-time job, and so nobody approached me. But 5 people got offered jobs, 2 accepted, and it was like we're leaving New York after 72 hours later, and people have jobs because of this thing we did. And what we decided we would do is, why not just keep having these events for Navy SEALs and special operators? So all that is to say, I've become like this entrepreneur. I think I was resistant to the idea of building a company because I didn't think I had enough experience to do it. And I thought that it was actually kind of funny that a guy that doesn't have a civilian job is helping other people get civilian jobs. But the reality is, I really deeply understand the trials and tribulations of very specifically Navy SEALs, and then by extension, special operators when they're getting out of the military. And because there really aren't any other programs, at least that do this really, really deliberately, that focus almost exclusively on that group, because it is a unique experience. It's a unique group. I thought, what, this is a good thing and it's helping people. So why not? Why not me? And I definitely look at myself as, a former SEAL, because that's something I'm very proud of. And but I definitely look at myself as an entrepreneur, and frankly, equally proud of that, because that's a different struggle, but nonetheless a struggle. And one that I'm very proud of.
Here I hear a man who found himself on the right side of the BUDS training process that takes a look at his SEAL career, and immediately you're stepping into an identity that's fully forged as a Navy SEAL, meaning I'm doing this for life, right?
Yep.
There's some complexity in your relationship early on in terms of what that means into how you're communicating with your partner, right? You talk about your wife later on, right?
Yep.
There might have been some expectations in that. You win the lottery, you go to Afghanistan, bam, immediately you're faced with a confrontation with this image that you have as a Navy SEAL, and you're confronted with the reality of what the hell it looks like over there, and it's sketchy as hell, and you're shaken up early on, which forces some really kind of deep searching in your relationship in terms about what this means, whether or not you'll be there for her. That's what it sounds like anyway. So as you start to reevaluate, you set an expectation, you make a contract with your wife, you say 4 years, and then here's where I start to hear your superpower already. Life continues to do what it does, and it's throwing some golden wrenches at you. You find out that your contract isn't what you thought it was, and you have to make an early exit. And I hear you being able to approach that with a level of humility and flexibility. I don't know how much you fought it. You didn't really talk about that, but I hear you being able to make an adaptation for the best possible outcome. You're saying, well, I want my relationship with my wife to work. I want to be here for them, and I want to support my family. And you find yourself in a really, really difficult crucible for any person that really understands the kind of connection that happens for people at the special forces level. There's a brotherhood there. So you're having to make a really difficult decision.
Correct.
But in your showing up story, you discover the superpower, which is, well, I can utilize my own struggle to understand other people's struggle and use that to my benefit. So the person that shows up is that person that's able to make this leap of empathy in the people that you relate to, saying, well, how can I make it better for myself? Because I know what I'm suffering with right now is how to create a new life and to support the people that I love, having been through what I've been through. And it becomes an idea. It becomes a leap meet. So this is what we'll be tracking in our interview, this superpower of resilience, flexibility, and empathy. Does this sound crazy in terms of what I'm saying, or does it sound right?
No, that is amazing. Spot on.
Okay, so here you are. We hear how you show up every day. You're a man that has made the leap from Navy SEALs to entrepreneur, but more importantly, it's an integrated leap. You don't have to separate SEALs from what you do now. It's part of your identity. You're a pretty healthy person who's carrying around the warrior. To get to that place to where you show up today, what would you consider your low point? And we can span this out, right? This doesn't have to be just about your Navy SEAL story, but this is about your life journey where you start to get a sense of maybe what you want to become. Where would you consider that?
You know, to the guys and gals from special operations and from the fighter pilot community, you know, this is a topic that is just kind of central in some ways to the experience, which is this idea of kind of going public with your military background to people that have no idea, that are just civilians. For example, if you Google Navy SEAL, right, like a lot's going to pop up.
This is Jocko Podcast number 149.
You ever think about quitting?
It's the combat of life,
Hey folks,
hammering the
welcome
snot
back
out of
to
you.
the Unbeatable Mind Podcast. This is Mark Devine.
You'll see books, you'll see movies, there'll be interviews, and frankly, like I've learned that there's a lot of things I used to feel one way about that I've changed my attitude on, but you're not going to think twice when you see that. It's very commonplace that you see, oh, Navy SEALs. Of course there's a Navy SEAL movie coming out. Of course there's another book because they're Navy SEALs. But internal to that community, there really are real people that do that job. And there is an enormous resistance. And, you know, I don't know how to describe it. Like SEALs generally, and I can probably expand this to include all of special operations really, do not like it when people like me start telling everybody that I was a Navy SEAL and here's my war story and here's this. And, look at me, because that is the impression. I'm painting myself very negatively, but people in that community, their gut reaction is that person is exploiting something that they themselves alone did not build. You're part of something, it's not yours. While I have not had, one particular instance where, I feel like I'm getting flack from the community, it is abundantly clear that there are people taking exception to the way that I market myself, that I market my experiences, the way I market probably Elite Meat. But the reality is in order to lead this organization, I can't buy into the idea that I'm doing anything wrong. I mean, certainly there are ways that I could be doing it that are wrong, and I avoid those things. Like I don't, specifically talk about individuals. I talk about me and I talk about the community. But the point is, like, in order for Elite Meat really to be successful, and I can point to the different connections we've built simply because of the marketing that I really am doing, someone needs to be public. And even though I definitely was the guy while I was active that was very much on the bandwagon of anybody who writes a book, for example, anybody who is in a movie or whatever, like F that guy, But like here I am that guy.
Well, can we put the microscope on that for just a second? Because this is a key emotional crisis for anybody that's in the Special Forces community. So to help the listener understand, we need to hear how John made the leap. And I just want to put my perspective on it, and then you correct anything that doesn't sound right, because you're the guy who did the work. So for those that engage in the Special Forces community, there's a part of you that when you go through that, you have to put the I in your back pocket the entire time. It becomes about the we, right? And it becomes about service. And the training's so intense that eventually, if you have an I, it gets burned away if you make it. Like if you find yourself standing, for the majority of people, I can't, make a broad typical sweep, but for the majority of people, they've earned the right to do what they do, and they've only earned the right because the I's not there anymore. It's not about me, it's about serving others, right? So you're saying that here you are, you're making this leap out of teams where there's this strong warrior code, and the code says you don't talk shit about what we do, right? You don't put it out there because it's not about for anybody else to get off on. It's not about that, right? There's a real strong resistance to it. But we've already heard in your story resilience and empathy. And I hear you when you're talking about this crucial leap that you've had to take. I hear you saying that you're willing to do it, and it's becoming about the we again. You're saying, well, it's not about me. Is there a real need? I'm hearing you say that. So how do you make that leap? What's so unique about John Allen that he can not only just serve the role as a Navy SEAL, understand the code, but also be willing, let's just put it out there as what it is, be willing to break it?
I think honestly, there's always been, just for me personally, I've always felt like when I have conviction about something, wrong or right, it's like I can't not continue doing what I'm doing. And actually a good example is when I decided I wanted to be a SEAL. When I really kind of made that decision, it was almost like a calling that I couldn't not do it. Now I could fail at it for sure, but in terms of making the leap to do it in the first place, it was like predetermined, right? Getting philosophical here, it was like predetermined completely, and I couldn't not do it. When I made the decision to get out, this is not the 2017, I find out my contract's jacked up. This is like talking to my wife. I've just, been awarded the Purple Heart, and I'm like this young Navy SEAL that's done all the things you're supposed to do, that's supposed to set you up for this big career. And I begin talking to my teammates about the reality that I was going to get out in 4 years, and I began kind of talking through, what other people might want to do when they get out. I was just kind of curious. I wanted to hear what other people had on their mind. And so I began talking to my teammates about, what would you do if you got out? What are you going to do when you get out? That's a normal, almost talking point. And by the time I found out about my contract being screwed up, I kind of came to realize that within the teams, there is definitely a pull on people that they do want to get out and do something else, but because they're in a system where you're literally rewarded by re-enlisting with a big bonus, and like there's all these things you get, that there are people that frankly probably should get out. And I realize that this is a questionable topic, but they probably should be getting out. But like culturally, it's like you're so bound to being in the teams, and no one really has a good sense of what you do because you're so head down in your work, that when I was like, now I'm really getting out, I looked around and it was like people were clueless.
What does that feel like? Can I ask you about that? Because that'll help people understand the emotional journey a little bit. So you're so wrapped up in the work of being a Navy SEAL, your identity's there every day, because the level of focus and intensity that you got to carry from day to day, but just plain, I'm going to put it out there. Typical people can't understand the level of tension that is and the level of focus. When you're that wrapped up, what does it even feel like to have this conversation about, well, what am I doing next?
You know, I was kind of at first frustrated by this, but over, certainly building out Elite Meat, I've come to really appreciate why this really happens. But when you become a Navy SEAL, and I can really only speak to this because it's my own experience, there's so much thought and preparation that went into just going to training. And then to succeed in training, it's definitely a mixture of luck and hard work. But by the time you become a SEAL, few people accomplish such a lofty goal. Forget that it's being a SEAL. Just imagine setting your sights on something, and you certainly can appreciate this. When you set your sights on something that is statistically, you probably won't succeed, right? But you actually get there. You cross that threshold, and now you're it. You become a Navy SEAL. It's actually kind of awkward how to figure out what happens next. Because on the one hand, you're firmly entrenched in this identity that is, by all accounts, a very positive one, and it's something to be, unbelievably proud of. And I am unbelievably proud of being a SEAL. But nobody really has a good sense of what to do next, because the people you talk to that are not Navy SEALs say things like, "Oh, you'll figure it out. You're a Navy SEAL. Oh, it'll be fine. You're a Navy SEAL." Yeah, it's like, "Oh, you've been shot out, so you can do whatever you want." And you're like, "Oh, yeah," because you don't want to like let them know that you're like, "I actually have no clue what I'm doing." You're like, "Oh, totally. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. You guys always know what to say." And then at the team, you talk to guys that know they have the potential to do anything they want, but they identify, they are Navy SEALs. And the idea of taking a risk and doing something else, even though they know they could probably be successful at it, you feel like you're almost risking everything you've built in becoming a SEAL.
So here you are on the top of the mountain, and you're going, "Oh, by the way, I got to walk down the mountain." And when I'm walking down the mountain, there's the risk that I will likely never come up again. So there's the emotional journey of having to, like, I hear you saying, you've not thought about the accomplishment. You're living in the accomplishment. Now you have to go, how do I make a living outside of this? That is coming down the mountain, right? There's a letdown to that.
There is an enormous letdown. And I think there is also just a very practical reality of when you're in the military, you have a very consistent paycheck. You have health insurance covered. You have everything is covered. I mean, we complain because everybody complains about everything in every situation, but we complain about maybe not getting paid enough or this and that. But ultimately, it is very, very stable. Yes, your job is volatile. It's supposed to be, but your income and compensation and healthcare, it's totally stable. And your partner, they also have been living in a very stable zone, and they think of you, whether they've known you forever or not, you're the Navy SEAL. And the idea that you're going to get out and have any issues in any capacity is totally not the person they know.
Name that so we can just actually give the listener something to bite into. What's that feeling?
Oh my God. I would say it's massive insecurity. I think guys are very concerned that they won't live up to the title of Navy SEAL in other capacities.
we're giving some background to really understand the low point that you're talking about, which is here I am now. I had to come down the mountain, make a decision to make this leap, right? And wrapped up in this is not even just the insecurity of having to go, wait a minute, I have to go down and possibly do something that I might not identify with. And I don't know if I'm going to succeed at it. Everybody's making an assumption that I can. So you re-experience insecurity, which for a Navy SEAL to do, they work damn hard to never have to do that again, right? Because you went through the training not to experience it. So here you are on the other side of the divide, right? And you're saying that you had to not only deal with that challenge, but there's a code. There's a code of, if you're going to get out there and talk about being a Navy SEAL, you run the risk of losing perhaps one of the most powerful parts of entering into the warrior code is the community.
Yeah, that is spot on.
So here you are. What happens?
There's actually quite a bit working against you as a SEAL thinking about getting out. The idea of losing your identity, in literally doing anything else, that's a big one. But true, like this idea of, this cultural kind of bias towards never talking about being a SEAL kind of publicly. And in fact, it's literally written into the ethos. It's, I will not advertise the nature of my work. It's like that was written for like the 20-year-olds at bars who are on active duty. It wasn't written for the folks who are, 40 years old, getting ready to get out of the military. And guess what? How do they explain the past 2 decades of one of the most incredible experiences that you can have? How do you handle that? Because it's backwards. But the problem is there's nobody, literally no one on the outside who's saying, hey guys, guess what? That's backwards. And I'll show you the way. I'll show you that there is an appropriate way to market who you are, what you did, because it's extremely important and you cannot run or hide from it.
You're on the hero's journey, but you didn't kill the hero. You took the hero and you're keeping the hero going. You're not using the hero as you've used the hero in the past, the role as just a Navy SEAL. The hero is continuing by honoring the path, and you're having to break a code along the way. The consequences are really more emotional consequences. It's the consequences of the risk of losing people that you care about, a brotherhood and a community. But your skill set is resilience, flexibility, conviction to continue the identity of the hero. And you're serving the Special Forces community in doing it. It's a huge leap, man.
Yeah. One that I would say regularly, I think through and understand that in some ways there is a line that once you cross, i.e. once you do begin to kind of advertise having been a SEAL and really there's a very definitive line. Once you've crossed it, it isn't that you can't go back and you're screwed. It's that you have to kind of own the fact that you did that. Like, it's not going to help anyone if I let anyone know that I have anything other than pure conviction that this is a good idea. Because guess what? They're going to be looking at me and like, like actually one of my very close friends who was on the deployment to Afghanistan with me, he called me maybe a month ago, and it was this totally kind of cagey discussion because he didn't say to me, hey, I want to talk to you about how to go about navigating, social media. He called me to just check in, right? Like, there's no reason for us to be checking in. We're friends, no doubt. But it was a random time to be checking in. And it was very clear that he was kind of almost seeking my approval for him to begin to advertise himself. And it's to add it to his resume. That's what we're talking about here. But culturally, this group is so resistant, and it's such a big part of the culture that kind of thing is a leap. Just putting it on your actual hard copy resume. And I remember talking to him and I knew it immediately. And I'm like, dude, it is okay to talk about being a Navy SEAL. It's not something you're going to hide. And if you ever have any issues with how it might be perceived, ask me, because I have run the gambit of people calling me to tell me to F myself because of what I'm doing, to people calling me to be like, you changed my life
when we're talking about your superpowers, well, it's everything that we've talked about already, but you have the strength to reimagine what the role looks like outside of combat, right? And there's been a few pioneers before you, and I've actually happened to talk to a couple of them. Mark Devine's a big one. He was an early guy. He was actually in my class, by the way.
Nice.
So here you are having to reimagine it, but you're already seeing the benefits, right? And perhaps that's the benefit of an organization like that you're standing at the top of right now, which is where our culture's broken in some way. And perhaps part of the ways that it's broken is some of these codes that we've built around connection. And the warriors have been kind of taken out of the equation and been forced to kind of see through the dark and the way back in, right? Like they're like, well, we'll just have to figure it out because of a code.
Yeah.
But you're saying, for me, when I stepped outside and I leaned into it and I was willing to own it through my own convictions, I'm already seeing the benefit, not just for the people that we can bring into another person's company, you know, in terms of their skill set, but for those that are suffering on the other side in the situation that you found yourself in. How do I make this leap? So I hear you saying empathy, resilience, but you're also a hero. You're taking the hero into culture again, but you're also reimagining the role for others. But when things started to get easier for you, what was helpful?
I actually had a very definitive moment where I needed to really think about what I was doing and how I was doing it. So we began Elite Meet early 2017. You know, at first, like I described earlier, it was just kind of this random event. And we just kind of iterated on it. By the end of 2017, we had done something like 5 or 6 events, but they were not unadvertised. They were more like closer to word of mouth, and it was kind of like if you knew somebody, you got to go. More private. At the end of 2017, we had an event in San Francisco that was very loud, very public, and by the way, an amazing event. And I gave a speech, or I should say I bombed a speech in San Francisco. It was our second dinner. And I remember, so I just in virtue of my position at all of these events and just kind of doing my job, I give quite a bit of talks about Elite Meet, about my experiences. And I think I still had an element of resistance to the idea that I was now a guy that has really gone public about my career. And I'm staring out I came up to speak at this beautiful restaurant. There's all these people in the room. And I took the stage, really the center of the room, and I had a microphone. And I've given like 50 of these things. And I remember looking around and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. I am literally about to tell a story about John, the Navy SEAL, and I looked around and I remember my mind went blank, and it wasn't from nerves. It was like, is this the right thing to be doing? If you watch a video of it, it's just like a really uninspiring and like terrible, like generic, we need more attendance at our events. Thank you so much. It was like very like blasé. And it was because I all of a sudden had this intense moment of like, have I made a terrible mistake? Guilt. And so I remember afterwards I came home and I remember I talked to my wife and I was like, man, I had this moment at the end of the event there where I kind of realized that, you know, I'm more and more becoming public, and I don't know if I'm ready for this. And, you know, we ended up talking about it, and I like, you know, I've already in some ways crossed the threshold. I might as well like learn how to do this. The good ways, the bad ways, learn what pisses people off, learn what doesn't, learn what has a great positive impact, learn what doesn't. Become like a pariah or don't, but whatever you learn in going full bore, I'm going to run this organization to the best of my ability. Whatever happens, I'm going to use my experiences to teach and coach the next group of people getting out about the ways that you should and the ways that you should definitely not talk about yourself, because I will have experienced it.
Sometimes the biggest life change moments aren't the ones where the explosions are going off. Sometimes the explosions are on the inside. I hear that you had made this leap, right? And you'd committed and you're convicted. And once John Allen sets his mind to something, he's going to do it. But you'd kind of reached the point of no return. But there was like this, there's this snapback, right? Like you re-experience what the hell you're doing, the guilt, right? Of who am I, right? The insecurity steps in. Who am I to be and why am I special that I can do this and nobody else is doing it? So here you are, SEALs training, Afghanistan. You face, you're confronted with your mortality early on. You change, your image is kind of threatened, and you reconsider what's important in your life. You recommit to your wife. You face another challenge, another crisis. Your contract is up. So do you have to reimagine yourself really quickly? Here comes all of John's superpowers rushing to the surface: resilience, conviction, empathy. You make the leap and figure out how to utilize all these things to make it easier for others. You step into elite meet, but you're saying once you got into there, it wasn't all, fuzzy kittens and easy. You're re-experiencing your guilt about being a brother, to this special community, but you utilize that to further make it better for others that are going to make the similar leap.
So were there some challenges around how you communicated this transition to your wife and to your family?
So my wife, we met in college, and so she knew me before I joined the Navy. She was with me through buds, and just she knows me like pre-Navy and post. And she, just in virtue of definitely being a part of the naval social warfare community, is acutely aware of really the lashing out that happens to people that quote unquote go public. And so I think initially, what I saw in my wife is that she was concerned just for me. She was not actually concerned about, what I was doing. She just knew what it meant. And so that was something that I realized that it's going to be on me to reassure her. Her role is not to reassure me. Her role is to understand that this is a big deal. And she's going to look for cues from me to indicate that I've made the right decision, that we've made the right decision. And so that was something that was a little bit difficult for me. And that certainly has factored in. My wife is very supportive of elite meet, but she doesn't know. She's not tied in to really the ins and outs of what this looks like. It's very complicated. And so around the same time that San Francisco speech just didn't go very well, and it prompted, me to really look hard at what I was doing and feeling that guilt. That was the first time really at all that I talked to my wife very deliberately about, I have now really gone public, and I don't regret it, but I definitely feel guilt about it, and I want to talk to you about it. And I think that was the first time that we both kind of were able to talk candidly about it. And I knew that I had her support, but she was like, look, I mean, it's your call here. But I do think that what you're doing is helping a big group of people that maybe they don't appreciate it, or they don't appreciate it yet, I should say, because they're still active, but they will. And so I think that it just came down to me saying, you know what, despite the criticisms, this is the right move. And when I took that stance, my wife did too. And the two of us are just kind of in step together, moving ahead.
That's part of the dynamic that's difficult, is wives often carry a big burden in terms of the emotional journey. So to see their husbands vulnerable isn't easy for them either, right?
Yeah, actually, that was it. That is a way better synopsis of what I just said. My wife was seeing me really vulnerable, and I was letting her see me vulnerable, and it was awkward for both of us. And it ultimately was always going to be like, John, it's you that needs to be making calls here, not me. I'm supportive of it, but if you're feeling a certain way, it's your decision to make moves left or right. And it was cathartic to share my feelings with her about being vulnerable, but it didn't change anything. It was just like, okay, it's public now. And I think the vulnerable side and being open with her, it made her feel uncomfortable, but ultimately her and I both are definitely in step now.
Yeah, well, threatened security. So there you are. Your security is threatened a little bit, but you're at the point of no return. You lean into your wife a little bit. You establish some vulnerability. You recommit. You figure out how to make it better for everybody else. If we put this into the bigger picture of the human journey, There's a much bigger identity that John Allen has. I mean, you're a professional video gamer. We haven't even talked about that, meaning like you've got a record and all of that.
Which maybe we should just slow down and focus on that for a second. Like, how old were you when that came in, and how does that fit into this story that we're getting today?
I was like 18, 19, and 20 in college, living in Boston, still at home. I had to withdraw from school, and I was living in my mom's basement, like hated by my mom and dad.
Oh,
like,
God.
I can't believe you.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So many romantic dreams.
I was working at a gym from like 4 in the morning to like 8 in the morning, and then I was going to class. And I was also beginning to think about being a Navy SEAL, and so I was training like a lunatic as well. So I was a full day. And at the end of the day, I would throw on skates, like unwind for like a couple hours before I go to bed. I don't even remember if I ever lost.
Everything's gonna be fine.
And I remember over the course of maybe 6 months of playing this game, I started getting these little notifications on my TV. It was like one new message. And after a while, it started saying like 70 new messages, 1,000 new messages, 20,000 new messages. And I was like, okay, what is this? And so I go into my like email function, and it was literally like hundreds of thousands of messages, all the way from EA Sports, you're the #1 world ranked player, all the way down to like people challenging me, like
You're not even that good.
and all this like hate mail, like
You think you're so good. You do you, man.
I load up the leaderboard, and there it is, my gamer tag, Pedroia1, the #1 ranked person in the world. And so, to be honest, it never really amounted to much except EA Sports. They wanted me to test a couple games, and I tested a couple games, and it was not what it is today with esports.
I wonder if you could work that into your marketing somehow. Not to go off script here, is like
No.
John Allen's back, like, and then you can bring you bring the elite meets mission behind it. Oh, I hear something. I'm gonna tease back into the interview.
Yeah.
We've identified some of your superpowers. Resilience is one of them. I'm hearing about your parents' role in developing resilience. They weren't afraid to hold some boundaries with you, and you had to work really hard to get what you want, right?
Yeah, fact.
You were willing to go the extra step. But here's the magical part of your story, that little story. Your parents setting boundaries set you on the path of resilience, and here came this focus thing that you just uncorked, right? Like, your ability to focus at that high a level, I'm sure that confidence that instilled in you had something to do with the next leaps that you ended up taking in life. It had to, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not common to be #1 world ranked in a popular online video game. It's not.
And you're the guy, like, oh, it's a unique quality even to consider something like the Navy SEALs, but you need everything that you have just to get in there.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so I just hear the magic of that all playing through that story.
Yeah. And then also decided I was #1 ranked in Skate 2, the next iteration.
No kidding.
At the time, I didn't have a smartphone, so I didn't take any pictures or anything. I just wrote it down in my little journal, like #1 ranked.
So here you are at the head of this company. You have a pretty clear sense of your mission. Where do you see yourself going, and what are the pieces that still need to come together for you? What's your big picture vision for you? Like, how do you satisfy John Allen as you move forward?
I think that one of the things that is kind of central to my kind of identity is I talked about, when I have conviction for something, it's like I can't not do it. I think the reason really that I am able to do that is because I really thrive when things are new. Like, I love change. I may not be good at navigating change, but I've always been someone looking to kind of almost impulsively do something new. And I don't really have a good answer as to why. And so I look at my life and think, man, I couldn't even begin to picture what I'll be doing. All I know is that I definitely am the type of person that I'm not afraid to like grab opportunity when it is in front of me. Like I think a lot of people, and I mean, it's true of even just going to buds. I mean, that's a big public thing. It's like you kind of got to have a mentality to be able to go do that in the first place. And I think that I definitely have that in spades. And so it's hard for me to look at my life and say, this is what I'm going to be doing. All I know is that if and when there are opportunities in front of me that make sense, that are in keeping with who I am the first person to jump at the opportunity to do something new. It's something that's always made me happy. That's always been satisfying.
Well, we can add that to your identity of your superpowers. And it took to the end of the interview to get to it. You might have been talking about it all along, but there's an explorer in you. There's an adventurer. And that you're talking about that hunger for newness, which has probably allowed you to survive for the majority of your journey. So let's say you're married. Do you have any children right now?
I do. I have 2.
All right. So John Allen, it's 30 years from now. Let's say you're still playing skate. It's skate like 7. And, you're up there and your children come to visit you while you're playing your game. You set it aside and your children have their children with them. So your grandkids walk in and they say something like this. They say, Grandpa, we're hearing a lot about success and we have no clue what that means. What would you tell your grandchildren?
I think that the thing that I have oft told people in this kind of question is the people that become successful aren't afraid to try. And also I would say that, whatever success means to you, you need to be ready for what happens if you become successful, because when there are expectations of you, that is different than when you're the underdog trying to do something for the first time. So you have to try in order to be successful, whatever that means to you. And then if you find success, don't be afraid of it. Be okay with having expectations placed on you, because that's part of success.
John Allen, thank you for joining the Pioneers of Insight podcast. It was really an honor.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This was an awesome episode. Thank you.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. This just helps put it in the hands of the people likely to get something out of it. If you'd like to dig a little deeper and see what we got cooking here at TOOWi Media, you can visit our website at TOOWimedia.com. Wishing you grace to fill your sails today. Stay great in the meantime, and I'll see you on the next Pioneers of Insight.
Done.
And so I just kind of made a point from that point on that I was like, you know what? All I can do is just keep showing up.